I always tell my clients, like, how are you playing dress up? What are you doing right now that's making you play dress up in your business? And how do you strip those layers off and really start showing people who you truly are so that they can see you and want to work with you and connect in that deeper level without it being, hey, here's my business card, buy from me. Like nobody's going to buy that way. Like the used car salesman way of selling doesn't work. It's all about human to human, relationship to relationship, deep conversations, truly letting people see you. And that still allows you space to not share everything.
Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. This week, we are welcoming Darlene Hawley to the podcast. I am very, very excited for you to listen to this episode because Darlene is going to share how to use stories in your messaging to make sure that you're connecting with your audience on a deeper level. We also touch a little bit on comparisonitis, content buckets from my perspective, but then she brings it into the brand side and making sure that you are keeping your content in alignment with what you've established your brand to be, how to really show up as your true authentic self, which is so important in the online space when everything is filtered and screened. And we want to make sure that as we're sharing information with our audience, we're showing up on our podcast, we're showing up wherever else, that we are doing it authentically. We are doing it as our true selves, that if someone were to meet us in person, they would be getting the same exact thing. Let's go ahead and welcome Darlene to the show. Thank you so much, Darlene Hawley, for being on the show. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yes, thank you, Alicia, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and cannot wait to dive into some fun conversation.
Yeah, so if you could just tell everyone who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Darlene Hawley, and I have ran a business for 15 years as an online business coach. And I primarily work with my clients on helping them with their personal branding, their marketing, their sales skills, so they can really get out there in the world and create a profitable online business that allows them to do the work they love, but also make space for themselves and their families. A lot of the times when I'm working with them, they really need support with deepening their business foundations because they want to go after more visibility, kind of like podcasting, right? Mm-hmm. And they want to share their message with the world. They want to attract dream clients, and they really want to have a big impact and have some freedom and flexibility in their schedule. I love the work that I get to do just to show up and really support them. And then I started a podcast 2 years ago. I'll be launching season 3 soon.
Congratulations.
Which is exciting. Thank you. And it's called Attract and Stand Out. And the premise of it really is helping business owners, especially coaches, consultants, service-based entrepreneurs, to really share their story and figure out what their story looks like so they can attract dream clients into their business and stand out amongst the competition. So I'm like, attract and stand out. I'm like, that's totally what I'm working with my clients for. So it felt like the perfect show name. It's so cool to hear my clients and then just people that come into my space to be on the podcast to hear their story, because there's so much inspiration and excitement. I know for myself, like when I hear someone's story, I've been in business for 15 years, and every single person I sit down with and hear their story, I'm always wowed by like what they went through, like the struggles, the triumphs, their big why, their passion, their mission behind it. Mm. And it's so fun just to hear what that looks like. So that's basically like the main premise of it, is just hearing their story and sharing from there. And then we all also dive into like what have been the big struggles with starting a business, because I learn best from hearing other people's mistakes, because then I can I can course correct really quickly here. And then I also want to hear the successes. So I pull that into the podcast as well, so we can really dive into like what's working, what's not working, and we can learn from those examples as well.
Oh, I love that so much, because it's like you said, like every story is so different. right? And you might get, okay, two people that lost their jobs due to COVID and started a business, but their businesses are going to be different. Their business models are going to be different. Their why is going to be different. So it really is like so unique to be able to share someone's like all their different stories. It's so wonderful. And I love the simplicity of your title because there are so many podcasts out there that are the title is something that's like, well, what is this about? Right. But it's very clear what your show is about. So I love that. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
It was on brand, which is perfect for a branding coach, right?
Yes. Exactly. Oh, so good. So I'd love to talk to you, like you talk about reclaiming your voice and showing up as your true authentic self and all of that great stuff. I know that finding your voice as a podcaster, especially a new podcaster, can be very, very difficult. So how do you recommend that people kind of get started with really finding what is their voice?
I so love this question because there's a lot that we could talk about. As entrepreneurs, the biggest struggle I see is people picking their niche, picking their ideal client, figuring out what their messaging is going to actually look like, which is AKA their voice, like what they're going to actually talk about, how they're going to sound when they come off, sharing what their story is, and then making sure they have a really clear offer that connects all of those dots together so that they can truly call in their dream clients, right? They want to attract their dream clients, and they also want to repel the people that they're not really here to work with, and the people that might have different values or might be on a totally different mission plan. And that's totally fine. Like some of my clients, when I first start working with them, like, I can't niche down because if I niche down too far, I'm going to like not get all this work. And I'm like, you're probably not going to get that work anyways. Like the more clear and concise your niche is and the clearer you are on who your ideal client is, the easier it is really for you to speak to the people that you want to talk to. It's typically the hardest thing I know for myself. It took me 2 years to really come into who I was as a business owner. My background prior to starting my business was in retail management, and I was really good at the work that I did. I was constantly getting awards for, Top Gun manager, going on trips. I could customer service anybody, right? Like I was operations, HR, training development. Like I could do all those things in my sleep. And then all of a sudden I bought a franchise and became a business coach. And I never had to market a day in my life. Like I just showed up to work. The clients were there and I could do what I needed to do and take care of them. And that was the easy part. And then all of a sudden I was thrown into the position where I was like, oh, I have to market myself. I have to figure out what my marketing is. And I looked back I used to work for Gap and Best Buy, and I was like, well, what was their marketing strategies? Like I would try to go back to like what they were doing. And I was like, well, this doesn't feel in connection to myself as at the time, I wasn't even an online business coach. I was just a business coach. 15 years ago, we didn't really have an online space, which is crazy. But it was trying to figure out like, how am I going to connect with my ideal clients? And it took me 2 years. I was so inconsistent in my messaging, inconsistent in my marketing, how I was showing up, what I was saying to people when I would introduce myself at a networking event. I remember walking into rooms and be like, hi, I'm Darlene Hawley and I'm a business coach and I can help you, create more profits in your business. And they'd be like, cool, what sport? And I'm like, wait, what? So it was one of those things where I knew what I was saying and I knew what I was trying to do and what I was going to be able to help my clients with, but getting that communicated in a way that really made sense to them and getting clear too, like who I worked with. I remember my first clients, I had an attorney, I had a landscape company, and I had a retail like grocery store, kind of like a Quickie Mart, 7-Eleven type of store. 3 totally different industries, right? Like there was nothing, everything I was saying to them, I was totally different marketing strategies, totally different techniques. And I struggled. I'm like, my messaging is so off here. Like, what am I doing? And I remember that 2-year point, really having what I call like a come into Jesus moment and just breaking down, journaling like crazy. And that was when I got really clear on the pieces that were missing. And for me, that was getting clear on my niche, ideal client, what my message actually was, who I wanted to work with, and my story. And when I figured out that my story mattered, that was like game changer. That's what set me apart from everybody else who was out there as a business consultant or a business coach or a marketing type of industry person that I was running into, that our messages all kind of blended in and they felt the same. And so now I work with my clients and, I'm like, how do we show up in a way that makes it really clear for us for who we're communicating with, what we're doing? And that was like game changing.
Oh, that's so good. What you said there about your story. I think a lot of people miss that in online business as well as podcasting because they're like, I need to share this information. But when you start pulling in parts of your personality, your interests, it's like you said, you start attracting the people that like those kinds of things, but also repelling people who are not going to be fun to work with.
Yes.
I remember when I first was like, okay, I'm going to do podcasting. This is what I'm going to do. It's going to be great. I'll work with anybody. Like, cause obviously like I was in that hustle.
You have to start.
Yes, right. I just need to make money. Let's do this. And so I would work with anyone, but I found very quickly that there were people that I definitely did not want to work with. And that was people who were new in business. I want established business owners who want podcasts. People who don't always know exactly what they want to talk about on their show. And that's why they need to go to someone like you, where you can kind of walk them through, okay, what is your voice? What is your message? Who is your ideal client? And then come to me and, okay, let's launch the podcast that makes sense for this message that you've already crafted for yourself. So it's so important to do that work up front and to understand, okay, this is how much of myself I'm going to be sharing. Like, obviously, you don't have to talk about everything in your life. Sometimes that can be a little off-putting, but it kind of goes back to this word. I was on a podcast earlier this morning. We were talking about this word, authentic. What does that look like to be authentic in your messaging and really be able to show up that way while still keeping some of your personal things personal, because you don't want to air everything on social media or wherever you're marketing, but still be able to show up as you.
It's so important that we show up as our true authentic self. There's so many people I see in the online space, especially, where you question, like you see their social media platforms, you see what they're showing up talking about, and you're questioning, like, is this true? Is this not true? I'm not sure. I come from the belief that you should show up and share what feels really good to you. If you feel like sharing a story, something that's impacted your life, something that's been happening, something that happened 10 years ago, whatever that is, when you're ready to share it, it's got to be because it's something that's going to help somebody else. Like, it's that ripple effect, right? Like, don't just share a story to share a story. Share a story because you're going to impact somebody else's life and you're going to be able to help them see something. They might not have the same story that you're sharing, but they can mirror themselves. They can see themselves in what you're sharing, and that's going to reflect back to them. And that's probably the most beautiful thing about storytelling is you don't have to share everything. You made me think, I always say, like, you don't have to share the skeletons in the closet because some other business coaches out there disagree. Like I remember being on a summit once with somebody else, and we had done like a fun Facebook Live with everybody that had been part of the summit. And there was a girl there we were talking about the same thing, like talking about sharing a story. And I had said, like, don't share what you're not comfortable with. If you're ready to share it, share it. If you're not, don't share it. And she's like, no, like, you're an online business person. You need to share everything. And to me, I'm like, there's definitely things in my life that just aren't going to be public. There's things that don't need to be said. They're not going to, is it going to help my ideal client? Like that's like one of the questions I ask myself. Is this story going to help my ideal client? And if the answer is yes, then I have a duty to share that story, and I'll share it when I'm ready. Sometimes that's immediately while I'm in the moment. Sometimes that's 10 years from now when there's a quote by Brene Brown. You probably heard it. Share from the scar, not from the wound.
Yes.
And when I heard that quote, it totally connected to the storytelling that I work with my clients on, is that you don't have to share when you're super raw and emotional. And like, if you're going to tear up and you get like that frog in your throat and like, you can't really share it, like, you're not ready. It doesn't mean that you're not going to share it 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 months, whatever from now, but come back when you're ready. I teach my clients to have what I call a story bank. Like, keep a place where anytime life happens and you're like, this might be a story I can use in my business, but not right now. I can't see how it connects. I'm like, add that story to the story bank. And then when you're ready and you're creating content around something else, and if that story makes sense and you're ready to share it, you can come back to it, but you don't have to share it right that second.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And I do not agree with what the other woman said. You don't need, like, some things are meant for the therapist's chair and other things are meant for, to share on social media or to share with your audience. And not everything is going to be pertinent. And one thing that I talk about a lot on the show is your content buckets, right? So you've got all of these things that you want to share about your life, but there are certain things that fit in certain areas of where you're sharing content. So for me, my podcast is the place to share about podcasting. Great. My stories, I will talk about all of the 300 smut books that I read this year. And I will talk about my dog and my kids and the Halloween wars and the Christmas decoration wars between us and our neighbor. But like my podcast, other than sharing it in this container here, my podcast is not the place to share that information. I'm not going to share the behind the scenes of my life on a podcast about podcasting.
Yeah, and sometimes you might have a story that comes up that is totally relevant and you'll pull it in. But I think that like I call it like brand containers. I can't remember what word you just used. Yeah. Content buckets. So I call it brand containers in my business, and we have to stay in our lane. Like I'm an online business coach. I'm going to talk about visibility. I'm going to talk about speaking up and using your voice and sharing your story and creating an offer that's going to really make an impact and really solve a problem for somebody who you're the solution to. Like those are things that are in my containers. But if I came in here and was like, Alicia, let me tell you about this new yoga pose that I learned last week, you guys would be like, what does that have to do with your business? Like, that's cool, Darlene. That's a really cool yoga pose. But what does it have to do with my business? Like you have to stay in your lane. It has to make sense. Otherwise, you really confuse your audience. They're not going to know what to come for you or come to you for. They're going to be like, do I come to you for yoga? Do I come for you for visibility tips? Like I'm confused, which means they walk away and they go find somebody else to do business with. So it's so important. Like, I love that you talk about it as well, like having a container for your business and still giving yourself a little bit of that freedom and flexibility that if you have a story you want to share and you think it's going to make an impact, go for it.
Yes.
As long as you can see like where it's going to take your ideal client. Mm-hmm. If you just tell a story to tell a story about what you had for dinner last night, like who cares what you had for dinner? Unless it's a really good recipe, and please send me all your really good recipes because I'm down to eat.
Yes. I'll have to connect you with a previous guest. I believe their podcast was called Sisters That Cook or something like that. I have to find it again.
Yeah.
Go back a couple episodes, guys. It went live in January, but they try new recipes. These two sisters try new recipes every week, and then they come on the show and they talk about it and they share it in their Facebook group. And I think it's so great. I was like, yep, we're going to check that one out.
Perfect.
Always looking for new recipes.
It makes me think too, like when I first started identifying that I should start sharing stories, because in the beginning I definitely was sharing zero stories. I was telling you who I was, what I could do for you, how I could help, but I didn't share, like I didn't pull in those pieces. And I remember where was I at? I was part of a panel somewhere and they asked me a question and I got quiet for a minute. And I was like, how do I answer this? Like if I answer the story, like this is going to take me off into like a story like that I had never shared as part of my business before. And I got nervous. Was trying to figure out like, what's the right word to use in the situation. And so I ended up sharing a story about, I was a teen mom. So my oldest son I had when I was 18, I was 17 though, senior year in high school. I worked in retail management. It was just me and him for the first 10 years of his life. And I worked retail management for probably about half of that. And I had like that constant battle, like work-life balance, which I don't use the word balance anymore. But back then I was striving to find work-life balance. I wanted to be a great mom. When I was at work, I was worried about what he was doing at home. Mm-hmm. And when I was at home with him, I was worried about my store because my job was pretty demanding and there was always something happening, a big walkthrough or getting ready for something. And so I just had like that overwhelm and knowing that I wanted something else in life and that this wasn't the path I was supposed to be on. I'm like, I'm not showing up as a really good mom here. Mm. I'm not showing up as a really good worker. And I wanted something different. But I was really afraid to tell people that I was a teen mom. Like there was a part of me that was worried, like, what are people going to think about this? Once I started sharing it and started talking about like working 60 plus hours a week and like feeling like mom guilt and work guilt and all these different things, it was amazing to me how many people came up to me and were like, oh my gosh, Darlene, like that totally resonates with me. It could be men that were just working tons of hours and they were missing going to their kids' soccer games. It was moms who felt that same way. Most of them were not teen moms, but that part didn't matter in the story. The part that mattered was that they felt they could see themselves in my story. And it was like this big aha moment for me because I never thought about it before. I just assumed like that those are private things that I don't need to share. But once I started sharing that, like I started connecting with people. They started seeing themselves in my messaging and they had totally different experiences, but started to build on what we all know is like the know, like, and trust factor, like giving us a chance to really get to know each other. connect heart to heart, build that trust, and decide, like from there, you could decide, do I want to work with this person? Are they the right fit? And most people that I know that I buy from are people that I feel like I could be friends with. I know them, I like them, I trust them. I feel like I've gotten to know them. Half the time it's from somebody like, our businesses are online, right? We don't actually meet people in person that often. Sometimes we do. But for the most part, I'm meeting somebody who's reading my content. They happen to follow upon my blog, or they hear a podcast, or they saw me speak on a stage or at a virtual summit. They opt into my newsletter list, devour the free content that I give. They see me show up and send out newsletters, and all of a sudden they're like, I feel like I know you, even though I've never met you a day in my life. And that's what I want. That's what I want my community to feel. I want them to feel like they know, like, and trust me immediately. And sometimes it takes, a little bit of time. It's not always immediately. Sometimes it is. Like, you can make that connection sometimes pretty quickly and tell people's values and how they're showing up with the world. But that's what really helps you grow your business. If you don't share your stories and you don't really connect to that deeper level, they don't ever get a chance to get to know you. And then you're a stranger on the internet. And we were all taught that, like, strangers on the internet are bad. Like, you can't buy from half my family still thinks like they don't know what I do because I have this online business, right? They're like, you're selling coaching on the internet to strangers. I'm like, pretty much. Yeah. But they're friends now. And they're like the best friends.
Yeah. I had a client say that her dad has no idea what she does. And he said something about her knowing some like big name. And she was like, no, I don't know that. Just because we're in the online space together doesn't mean I know everybody.
Yeah, it's a pretty big world these days.
Yes, for sure. I love what you said about like making sure you're sharing your stories. And I think podcasting is such a unique way to build that know, like, and trust factor very differently than if you are posting blogs, posting on social, even stories on like Instagram or Facebook, or I know LinkedIn and Pinterest are doing stories now too. So everywhere. So even further than that, there is this very unique aspect of podcasting where you are in someone's ears as they go about their daily life. And so if you're watching a video, you're usually face to phone, face to computer, watching that. But when you're listening, typically you're working on something else. You're driving to and from work. You're going to get the kids in the pickup line. You're cooking dinner. I like to listen in the shower sometimes. This is the only time I can actually get to listen to a podcast because I'm working on podcasting all day. And so, like, you're in people's personal space, and it creates an even deeper connection. I feel what I like to call the celebrity effect, where they're like, you don't know me, but you're my best friend because you walk the dog with me every day. And I love that so much. And I think what you're saying is so important about sharing stories and sharing more about who you are, that really allows you to connect with your audience on that deeper level. Taking that a step further, obviously what we do, even in the online space, there are other people, quote unquote, competitors. I don't like calling them competitors, but in the business world, they are your direct competitors who are doing the exact same thing as you, who are providing the same exact services, who may also have a show, who may also have a live show, who may be doing the same types of content as you. How do you stop that comparisonitis? Because I think that stops a lot of people from even starting a podcast. They feel that they can't talk about their services. They can't share because there's already so many podcasts out there. There's already so many YouTube shows out there.
Yeah.
There's already so much content. I'm just adding to the noise. What would you recommend for that feeling?
You put your heart and your soul into your show. And I want to help you reach all of those potential listeners out there. That's why I'm excited to announce my upcoming podcast marketing workshop. It's about giving you practical tools to grow your audience. You'll learn the secrets to getting your podcast discovered, attracting your dream listeners, and boosting those download numbers. This workshop will be hosted live with a replay available on April 30th. You can sign up by going to galatimedia.com/workshop. Let's grow our podcasts together.
Such a good question, because the one thing that sets us apart from like you said, I don't believe in competition either. Like I feel like they're my collaboration partners. They're other people out there doing the same thing. But the thing that sets us apart from them is our story. There's nothing else that sets us apart. Like if you have two apples and they are exactly the same, but one, I don't know if apples tell stories, but in this case, apples are telling stories. But if you build a friendship and that connection with them, they're going to buy from the person that they feel the most connected to. So there's that piece of just showing up and being yourself, like showing your quirks, talking about what you enjoy doing. Like I talk about loving wine. I talk about loving vanilla chais. I talk about being a mom because I'm a mom of 4. That's real life. That's part of my day-to-day life. And those are things that are part of like my brand containers where I talk about those things and I show up, and that's part of what people will get to know me by. And that's what separates us. So the more true and authentic and vulnerable we can be with our community, it gives them a chance to really get to know us. And then you don't have to compare. There's no comparisonitis at that point because you're just showing up and being yourself. You're uniquely positioned at that time to build the friendships, build the relationships, grow a community of people who want to hear from you, who want to, hear your podcast each week or check out your YouTube video, or if they hear that you're speaking at a summit or on a stage somewhere where they can get to that conference, they're going to try to go because they already are what I call a raving fan. They're a raving fan of the work that you do, and they're going to want to meet you. And I always joke, I'm like, when I meet people, most of the people I meet are virtual, right? They're on Zoom or they're in some form or way we're meeting virtually. I'm like, the only thing I want to feel different when we meet in person is I might want you to go, oh, you're a little bit taller or shorter than I thought you were. Like, I want them to feel like if they see me from speaking on stage, they see me on a summit, they devour my content because I provide a ton of free content each month. I want them to know exactly who I am so that when we meet, they feel like they're meeting a friend from high school or from college, and they just want to like hop right back into things and start the conversation again. There's nothing. I've met people in real life that I had met first virtually, and they were nowhere near the same person. It was it was like a mirage. I was like, you are not who I thought I was meeting. And that was so heartbreaking to me. So I try really hard to teach my clients to show up as their true selves, talk about things that matter to you, like get to know people, know what you're like. And I keep saying the word values, but the values are so important. How are you showing up? What are you taking a stance for? What do you support? What are you about? Like, people need to know those things so that if they meet you in person and you start having like a deeper conversation, there's not like somebody taking off the mask and being completely surprised by who they're getting to know. And it makes me think back to like when I first started my business, I was wearing business suits. I was carrying a briefcase. I had like a legal leather notepad thing, and I had all my business cards, and I felt like super organized because that's what I saw other business coaches doing in the space that I was in. And I felt like a little girl playing dress up in her mom's closet. I didn't feel like Darlene. I didn't feel like me. So as I went through like that transition 2 years in my business, like that was part of what I uncovered. I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I feel so awkward and I'm not building the connections that I need to be building. Like everybody knew who I was. I like to joke that I was like Norm from Cheers, because like I could walk in and they were like, hey Darlene, how's it going? Everybody knew who I was, but nobody really knew me because I wasn't letting them really get to know who I was at that deeper level. And that's like game changing. And that's when like you don't have to compare yourself to other people. I always tell my clients, like, how are you playing dress up? What are you doing right now that's making you play dress up in your business? And how do you strip those layers off and really start showing people who you truly are so that they can see you and want to work with you and connect in that deeper level without it being, you know, hey, here's my business card, buy from me. Like nobody's going to buy that way. Like the used car salesman way of selling doesn't work. It's all about human to human, relationship to relationship, deep conversations, truly letting people see you. And that still allows you space to not share everything.
You talked a few times about brand containers, and I want to end with this because I know we're coming up on time. How do you recommend people kind of start? Like, how many do you recommend people have? What kind of are those starting points? I know you mentioned values a few times. Is that one of those brand containers, and what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I encourage my clients. Actually, one of my clients I was working with recently, we were going through this exact same exercise. She was trying to figure out like, what is her lane? What are her brand containers that she wanted to talk about? She identified 7 brand containers for herself. And I usually say I tell my clients like 5 to 10, no more than 10, because it's too much, it's overwhelmed. But you can have up to 10. Like if I look at the framework of my business, there's 3 main pillars that we talk about, which is like the personal branding, the visibility, your marketing strategy, and then there's the sales component and having like the sales systems in place. Like those are like 3 of the containers that I talk about. Those are things that I on repeat, right? When you think brand containers, think content creation. If I was to sit down right now and create content for my community, what do I want them to know and what's going to keep me in my lane? And if you ever sit down and like have an idea to like write a random blog post or record a crazy podcast, right? If it doesn't fit into your containers that are what you're known for and what people are already expecting from you, then you know, okay, this is probably not something I should be doing. Let's scratch this. Or how can I tweak it and add something to this that would make it contain inside one of my containers? That's okay, right? Like it's a matter of finding the right structure for you that's going to allow people to get to know you and what you talk about without them feeling overwhelmed with your content. And figure out like, what do you like? One of them is your business. One of them might be with my one client, it was her business is one of her containers. So she talks about the things that are part of her framework for her business. She talks about being a mom. She talked about travel. She loves to travel, and that's something that she does on the regular. So that's part of her. She doesn't really call it a laptop lifestyle, but that's what that's the trendy word that you hear out there in the online space. Like for her, it's the freedom and flexibility. She can travel while running her business. I guess I have a laptop lifestyle, even though I live in Temecula, California, and my husband does not have a laptop lifestyle. So we can't go far. But like finding those things that are important to you that you would talk about with your friends without going into like crazy like drama details or different things like that. Like if you like your clients that were on your podcast with the cooking thing, like for them, like one of their containers would be recipes and cooking and playing in the kitchen. Like that's one of their things. That's obviously part of their main brand container. Say I love to bake and cook. I could talk about that if I wanted to as an online business coach, if I could frame it in a way that would make sense for my business. So find to start like 5 containers that make great sense to you, things that you love to talk about, things that really show who you are. And I don't classify values as a brand container as much as like an overarching piece of my business. Find the things that matter to you. Integrity, trust, social justice, like the things that are important to you. Those are things that you're going to slightly weave those values into your content. So you'll talk about it on a podcast. You'll talk about it in your blog. If you go to my website, or to somebody's website, you should be able to see, like, do I trust this person? Do they have integrity? Do they align with where I'm trying to go in life? Do they support the type of communities that I want to be a part of? You should be able to feel that. Maybe not from the very first piece of content, but if you dig, you should feel that if you're going into their content, listening to different things, you should feel like you're getting to know who they are. And if your values are in alignment with theirs, it's going to be a win-win. Because as soon as there's somebody who says something a little bit off and I'm like, nope, that's going again. Like if I get a gut no, it's typically because their values are totally opposite of mine. And if they don't support what I support, I can't support that.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fantastic. Everything that you've said, it reinforces a lot of what I say about the content buckets and making sure that you're sharing content that is pertinent to your listeners, that it makes sense for your audience, that you're not just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall, hoping it sticks. None of that stuff. So if you could just tell people where they can find you, hang out with you, connect with you further. If you have any freebies or anything, love to hear about that now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to hang out with me is either my website, which is darlenehawley.com, or the only social platform I really hang out these days is on LinkedIn. So you can find me just Darlene Hawley. Super easy. If you go to my website, darlenehawley.com, on the homepage, I have an amazing free gift that will help you building out the foundational pieces for your business. So if you're struggling with your niche and your ideal client and your messaging and what to offer and how to get the visibility to really grow your business, if you download the free gift, it gives you 6 super easy step-by-step instructions for like the first thing you can do that you can implement today, 100% for free. And it'll make a change. It's a game changer for your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited for this to go live. So everybody go check out Darlene, go check out her stuff. We'll have links for all of that in the show notes.
and you can find more information there. All right. Thank you so much, Darlene, for being here today.
Thank you, Alicia. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.